Today, we're diving into the story of a man whose roar of defiance shook the British Empire, long before India's independence. We're talking about Sangolli Raayanna, the legendary Lion of Kittur. And let me tell you, his fight is an absolutely incredible tale of courage, brilliant strategy, and ultimately, sacrifice. I will be reborn. Just think about that. These were the last words of Sangolli Raayanna. It wasn't a plea for mercy. It was a promise, a powerful, defiant promise that his fight for freedom would echo for eternity. So who was the man behind such an incredible statement? Well, let's get into it. To really understand the lion, you have to understand where he came from, the land he walked, and the pride he was born into. So let's go back to the very beginning. Raayanna was born on August 15th, 1798. But his story really begins way before that. See, he came from a long line of celebrated warriors, and this wasn't just some dusty family history, it was his whole world. He grew up surrounded by traditions of courage and skill in battle. It basically set the course for his entire life. You know, every hero is forged in the fire of some crisis. For Raayanna, that fire was the British threatening his homeland, the Kingdom of Kittur. And his loyalty, his leadership, everything was about to be put to the ultimate test. And things went downhill fast. First, tragically, the king and his son both died. So Queen Chennamma did what any ruler would do. She adopted an heir to keep the kingdom going. This was a perfectly normal, sovereign right. But the British saw an opening. They refused to recognize the new heir, which gave them the perfect excuse to try and take over, lighting the fuse for the first rebellion back in 1824. And right here, you can see the two worldviews just smashing into each other. For Kittur, it was simple. This was their right, their tradition. But for the British, it was all about policy. They were using this controversial rule, which would later be known as the Doctrine of Lapse, to just gobble up territory. The rule basically said that any kingdom without a direct, natural-born heir just gets absorbed by the company. For Kittur, this meant war was pretty much unavoidable. Now, during that first war, Raayanna, as the chief of the army, fought like a lion. But eventually, the British forces were just too much. They overran the kingdom and they captured Queen Chennamma. Now, for most people, that would be game over. But for Sangolli Raayanna, nope. This is where his personal war against the empire truly began. His loyalty wasn't just to a queen on a throne, it was to the very idea of a free Kittur. Raayanna was smart. He knew he couldn't win a straight-up, conventional war against the British military. He was completely outgunned and outnumbered. But he wasn't outthought. He needed a new plan, something that would turn his biggest advantage, his knowledge of the land, into a weapon. And that's when he turned to guerrilla warfare. I mean, think about it. Instead of these huge, predictable battles, he would use speed, surprise, and sabotage. He basically became a ghost, hitting the British where they were most vulnerable and then just vanishing back into the countryside before they even knew what hit them. His strategy was honestly a masterclass in this kind of fighting. He wasn't just attacking soldiers, he was attacking the entire British system. First, he built a people's army from local fighters. Then, he launched this four-part attack: mess up their administration by burning government offices, cripple their economy by raiding their treasuries, and, crucially, punish any locals who were helping them. For years, he was this phantom that the empire just could not catch. So that raises a big question, right? How do you possibly stop a man who seems unstoppable? For the British, the answer wasn't going to be found on a battlefield. It was going to come from somewhere much, much darker. This was the question that was literally haunting the British commanders. Raayanna was more than just a soldier by this point. He was a symbol of resistance. And how on earth do you defeat a symbol? The answer they came up with was as effective as it was chilling. They realized they couldn't beat the lion with force. So they decided to find a snake to poison him from the inside. They chose treachery. And this is the truly tragic part of the story. In the end, Sangolli Raayanna was never defeated in battle. He was betrayed. His own uncle, Lakshmana, conspired with others and led him straight into a British trap. The Lion of Kittur wasn't brought down by a foreign army, but by the very people he should have been able to trust. But his capture wasn't the end of his story, not by a long shot. In fact, it was his final moments that really transformed him from a man of flesh and blood into an immortal legend. Okay, and get this for a twist of historical irony. The date of his execution was January 26, 1831, a date that would one day, of course, become India's Republic Day. The British brought him to a banyan tree for his execution, thinking this would be the final crushing blow to the rebellion. They failed, miserably. Facing his own death, Raayanna showed zero fear. Instead, he made this thunderous promise that just echoed through the crowd and down through history. I will be reborn to free my country from the British. In that single moment, he became a martyr, and his spirit became way more powerful than his sword ever was. So you have to wonder, what happened to that promise? Is his spirit still remembered today? Well, as we're about to see, his story isn't just history. It's woven right into the fabric of modern India. I mean, his name isn't just tucked away in some dusty old textbook. It's everywhere. If you've ever been to Bengaluru, you've definitely seen the Krantivira Sangolli Raayanna railway station, or the KSR metro station named for him. Millions of people see his name every single day. There's even a museum and sculpture park dedicated to his life. He is not a forgotten hero. He is a living, breathing part of Karnataka's identity. Which kind of brings us to a final thought, doesn't it? What is it that makes a hero's story truly immortal? Is it the battles they won? Or is it maybe the incredible courage they show when faced with certain defeat? For Sangolli Raayanna, his most profound victory wasn't on some battlefield. It was right there, at the foot of the gallows, where he turned his own death into a timeless promise of freedom.